Welcome to the Lebra Podcast, where education leaders explore the intersection of culture, strategy, and innovation in today's schools. I'm your host, Nate Lichte, and in each episode, we'll uncover the leadership habits, systems, and bold ideas that help districts thrive. Hi, Amber. Thanks for sitting down with me today and sharing some of your time.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, so let's maybe jump in and introduce yourself to our listeners. Maybe give us a little background about what led you into education first, and then ultimately what led you to the superintendency.
Absolutely. So my name is Amber Wheeler. I am superintendent in Humboldt schools at this point. So growing up, my dad was a principal and my mom was a teacher. So I am truly a generational educator. And so, of course, in high school, I was going to do anything but education because
Yeah.
that's what you do in high school, right? It's anything but what your parents do. And quickly became obvious that that was the path that I wanted to take. And so I taught elementary school for a while, taught some middle school. I spent 13 years as an elementary principal. I tell people I lived in Little Land and I liked it there, fit in there. But along the way, I had some really great mentors who encouraged me to take next steps, both as a teacher to a principal and then again as a principal to a superintendent. I had a superintendent, David Carragher, who just really invested in me as a leader. And when I started talking about and thinking about this, he very much encouraged that. And so gave me some opportunities to learn along the way. And it was still a scary jump to make the jump to the superintendent level. And I've been here now for 5 years, which seems kind of crazy. It just seems like yesterday. And so I actually came into this role just shortly after COVID. So I didn't live that initial part, but I have certainly lived the aftermath. And so this is my fifth year here in Humboldt.
Wow. So tell us a little bit about the district. Tell us like regionality, where it's at in Kansas, the makeup, the demographics. What's the students, the teachers, the community like?
So we are Southeast Kansas. I used to say, oh, really Southeast Kansas. And then I went and worked in some other districts that are much more Southeast Kansas. So we say we are 2 hours from everywhere. We are the middle of everywhere, not the middle of nowhere, but middle of everywhere. We're about 2 hours from Kansas City, 2 hours from Wichita, 2 hours from Joplin, 2 hours from Tulsa. So we kind of sit right there in the middle.
Yeah.
It's a great place to be. So I tell people a lot that Humboldt is a growing rural community, which is rare in our area, but through some really targeted efforts, they have been very specific in growing our community, and some people have really invested in that. And so we have a dynamic downtown area. We have a candy shop, a coffee shop. We have a toy store that just opened. We host Water Wars in the middle of everywhere concert in September. And Humboldt itself, I tell people all the time, they are a yes and community. Like an idea comes up and somebody's like, yeah. And then, so that trickles over into our school district, which is really exciting. Like when we start talking about opportunities for improving or things we'd like to see, that's what I hear. I hear, well, yeah, let's go do that. And so, Humboldt itself generates has that type of community personality. And so I think that shows up in our schools as well. We are, I would say, a typical Southeast Kansas district in terms of demographics. We have high numbers of free and reduced students, but our community holds some really great industry. So we have some very large industry that we draw people from a lot of outlying areas. So we have a lot of out-of-district students, and part of that is because their parents work in our community. And
Yeah.
truly, if housing were not such an issue, we probably would have many of those families living here. So we do take a lot of out-of-district students into our schools and have for years, but that has continued to grow. So teacher-wise, we have about 60 certified educators in our district, about 100. By the time we get all of the people who work in our buildings, about 130 or 140, depending on the year.
Wow.
We do have a lot of exterior, so our special education services are provided by an interlocal. So we have interlocal staff that mix in with us. We also have on-site mental health support. So we have a really good relationship with our local mental health group. And so they have push-in services. They have offices in our buildings. We have a lot of exterior people who also we claim them. They're ours. We don't write their paychecks, but they work with our kids, and that's what's important. So we do a lot of that type of work. I would say one of the most exciting things, and it's a community slash school event, is last June, we rolled out a Promise Scholarship. The Works Family Foundation rolled out a Promise Scholarship. So now there are levels, like you can't come just as a senior, but if you attend our school district, your first 4 years of school will be paid for, of college.
Wow.
Which is absolutely amazing for our kids, and,
Yeah.
it was awesome to watch. It was retroactive to last year, and I had the opportunity to sit in a room when some family members found out about it, and, the happy tears that came were, so exciting to watch, and so we have, someone who is actually working with that program, but they also work with us to look at what do our kids need at the next step. So she's meeting with kids that are in college. She's calling kids who thought they were going to college and then maybe aren't, and saying, "Was it money? Because if it's money, I can help," you
Yeah.
know?
That's amazing. So you mentioned you've got a large, free and reduced lunch cohort of students, and then you've built out this Promise program that helps with this piece of after education. How can you take us back a little bit and tell us how did that get started, and where did that partnership come from, and that sort of piece of it?
So the Works family in town has done a lot of work around. I mean, they've always been great school supporters. Their family business is B&W Trailer Hitches, and so they've done a lot of work around our community. And when they first came to me and said, "Hey, we want to start this," like I'm pretty sure I cried. But like the idea was that they want kids to graduate from our schools, go out, they want them to get some degrees, and then they want them to come back.
Yeah.
And so the idea is, "Hey, we're gonna help you with some college stuff. You're gonna go out and get some degrees for some things we need. We need in Humboldt. We need nurses and teachers and doctors and lawyers and all of those kinds of things. And we also need plumbers and electricians and construction workers. Good heavens, we need some houses, some of that kind of thing." And so they said, "Hey, all of that stuff qualifies. Go out and do that, and then come back here and raise your families."
Yeah.
Like that's and then the money is guaranteed right now for 25 years. So our kids who are getting that right now, pretty good chance their own children will be
Yeah.
able to access that as well. And so, that's kind of the idea behind it. And I think kind of where it came from was truly people saying, "We love Humboldt and we want to see really great things happen here. And we love the kids that are here. And we don't want kids to have to decide on their future based on what money is in their bank
Yeah.
account."
Mhm.
And like I love that they talk about they want kids to think about their biggest dreams, not the dreams they think are reachable because of the financial piece of it, but we want you to go after your biggest dreams. And I think that's to me what Humboldt just is about. Like, go after the big dream.
Yeah.
And even our community, like if you were to look at some of the businesses, I mean, who thinks that the little bitty Humboldt, Kansas can have the type of downtown stores that we have available? And it's because somebody dreamed a big dream. And so to me, that's what that is about. And that I feel like that was what that foundation and that family was really about when they were creating it. Is they said, "Dream something big and go for it."
Yeah. I love that we're talking about this because we've had some other districts that are, rural communities and districts. And rural districts have always been a piece of my heart just because I love them. And, many of them are facing declining enrollments, right? They're struggling with a completely different version of challenges. And hearing about Humboldt and hearing about how the community is so involved in the district, and not only are they involved from like an advocacy standpoint, but now partnering with this to actually instill and grow. And you're already seeing that. You mentioned earlier that the enrollment is increasing, and now with this kind of initiative around and this Promise program to dream big, right? Like, so talk to me. Is there anything else you're doing in the district with this partnership where you're encouraging students to dream big and exposing them to the plethora of opportunities that are out there?
Yeah, so our CTE Pathways has been a real push for our district. So that is our career and technical education
Wow.
system, and it's when I came and we had started that process, we actually took one of our teachers and we hired a CTE coordinator to kind of run that because what we really wanted was for kids to get out. It's great to have those programs in our building, but our kids need to get out and experience that, and it just takes a lot of time to schedule and find people willing to take interns and find opportunities for kids to do that. And so that's a big part of her goal. And she, I believe, last count we were at 20 26 pathways, like
Um,
26 different opportunities for kids in a 3A in a we flirt back and forth between a 2A district and a 3A district. We're 2A
yeah,
this year, we'll probably be 3A again next year. Um, but, like, that type of opportunity, at a school our size is, I feel like a really good effort, and we see a lot of things. We still build a house. Like,
yeah,
our kids still build a house in our building trades program, and we just sold one of the houses. Well, we're in the process of selling one of the houses that they built, and, all of those things are about helping kids find where they wanna be. There is a lot of pressure there, though, because
yeah,
if we're paying for that, there is an expectation of maintaining a certain GPA, which means that we have a responsibility to prepare them academically to be
yeah.
able to reach those dreams and to be able to manage those courses at the college, and, so it definitely is also a reminder to us that that academic excellence piece is important.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I want to expand into that a little bit here in just a moment. Before we jump more detailed into that, let's go back to when you first. I want to transition to kind of talking about leadership and its impact in terms of, you're sharing these things that how you're partnering with the community, the rural districts. But let's go back to when you first entered into the district. You mentioned you started right after COVID, entering into this, the district, and entering as a superintendent to a rural district, right, where the community has heavily involvement can be challenging at times. Can you talk to us a little bit about challenges, opportunities in that experience, what you did, in the beginning to kind of help, as your entry into the role?
So part of that I think is being part of the community.
Yeah,
So, just being out and about, and uh, the truth is in a community our size, a lot of the community activities are school activities. Their
yeah,
football games and their basketball games and their events. I have a unique kind of scenario where I came in with a young child, so I had a 1-year-old. So I spent a lot of time in that early area. Like, I had daycare here in town, and got to spend time as a board member on that at that daycare, and I spent time, working with some home programs, and just spending some time in that area. So some of it was just my life experiences put me in some opportunities to engage in specific areas. I think when we talk about community involvement as far as, I grew up in a rural community, like, I've lived in rural communities all my life. I'm not really sure what I would do if it took me 20 minutes to get to work. Like, I could be there 5 minutes, from anywhere. That's where I've always lived, and it's what I love.
yeah.
I grew up in a small farming community just a few miles south of here, and, so this is home too for me. So that community piece was, I think, really important. When we talk about community, one of the things that we just recently finished was we call it our Cubs Community Care Center. It was a $4.97 million federal grant that we received, but it's the idea that in a rural community, we have to come together to provide services, and
Yeah,
so it's intended to be in a multi-use building. So, we have a daycare center there on site, focused towards staff, but any extra spots we have are open to community members. It has a community space so they can come in, and I think we had somebody, do some exercise stuff in there last night. We've had different groups rented, our trap team used it for their meeting, all that kind of stuff. Just a space because there's not a lot of those spaces around our community. But the biggest partnership that we had was we had it's really important to have medical services
yeah,
in small communities, and that affects schools. Like, it affects our attendance, it affects our kids and our families, and We knew that they were in a facility up here downtown, and they had a pharmacy on one half of their space and the primary care on the other, and it was too small, and they did not have room to grow. And so we actually partnered with them. And so half of that, about a third of that building, is all primary care on site. And
Wow.
the cool part about that is we put in an X-ray room. Our community hasn't had an X-ray room in almost 10 years. And so we have that facility out there. And they also, in that same facility, our district's a little unique. I probably forgot this part. We actually have about 600 brick and mortar students. We call them brick and mortar. They come every day. And then we run about 250 high school students, and depending on the time, anywhere from 50 to 100 adult students through a virtual program that we have. And so that we had also expanded that space, and we were out of room in our current building. And so we came in, and part of that building is space for that. And it's also a workforce space. So we wanted somebody to walk in and say, I don't know what I want to do, but it is not what I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
And people that can say, oh, do you have your high school diploma? Nope. Okay, here's where you're going to go. We've
Yeah.
partnered with Allen Community College. They're going to host on-site classes. I think when we talk about rural communities and how they come together, we have to be better about combining services. And sometimes we step on toes, and it feels uncomfortable because it's really hard for us to make all of those things come together. But I think in our community, we found that if we can engage in partnerships with each other,
Yeah.
we're able to provide services that are unheard of in rural
Yeah.
communities.
Absolutely. It's that community is so much about the integration of those services and finding those opportunities for the holistic community to grow together, which clearly you all, by increasing enrollment and things, are, the community is doing just that. Can you share with me a little bit? I want to get a little bit more detailed into like kind of your specific leadership, but as your community is growing, as the district is growing, right? As a leader leading this district, right? There's challenges and opportunities that come up of that. And rural districts face those challenges. Can you talk to me about like the challenges that you kind of experienced in terms of resourcing and staffing, or the opportunities that are there, and just how you've personally kind of addressed those and built that culture of belonging within the district?
I don't think this is a Kansas issue. I think this is probably a nation issue. Finding qualified staff is hard right now. It's not just teachers. Like, we talk a lot about teachers, and that is so vital. And I feel like as a state, we have done some things to move in that direction. Just this year, we hired back she student taught for us first semester, and is, well, student taught, but she's teaching in that same room as a teacher this year. And she went all the way through our education pathway. So she was one of our people. She did her internship in the building that she is now a teacher at. She came back and substituted for us while she was doing some of her learning. And this idea of a grow your own type of scenario really kind of it's certainly a highlight. And she's phenomenal. Like, she's a great teacher. We knew she'd be a great teacher because we knew in high school she was going to be a great teacher. And so to be able to bring her back and have her teaching our littles right now is, I think that's probably one of the greatest things that we can do, is to bring our own people back. But I also think part of that is and one of our challenges right now is I started at the beginning with, we're 2 hours from everywhere, and that's great, but we're also kind of 2 hours from everywhere.
Everywhere. Yeah.
And so sometimes that can be a challenge. And so I think our community has worked really hard to take a look at why, like, what is it about being 2 hours from everywhere that's difficult? Shopping, like, you can't just pop into a mall. But we've really worked hard to provide some, like, we have a couple of clothing stores, we have a candy shop. So we've worked really hard to provide some opportunities there. Entertainment's a big one. And I know there are some things in the works for that. We have some amazing trails. So like exterior stuff, like if you want to go and be active, there are lots of ways for you to do that in this community. But it's January, right? So
No.
we're not doing that right now.
Yeah.
And although the last couple of weeks we've been outside a lot, but typically that's not what happens in January in Kansas. And so what are some areas? One of the things that, recently opened up is golf lounge, like they do inside golf, and some of those kinds of things. And I think we've really tried to highlight the fact that you're right. You can't drive 5 minutes and hop to a mall,
Right.
but a lot of the things that you would find in that mall, you can find here.
And using those as attractors for
Yeah.
staff and
And we also talk a lot about, building a culture of excellence, and we've worked hard to create a scenario where, our vision statement for our district is, Cubs Nation, where all people matter, because we want our teachers to feel valued. We also want our classified staff to feel valued. If you talk about an area that's difficult to fill, we need custodians, we need cooks, like, I need to feed our kids every day.
yeah.
We need paraprofessionals, great ones. So we've worked really hard to, we're not where we want to be yet, in salary, but, we've worked really hard to build that. I think we've jumped $4 in starting pay since I got here 5 years ago. So really working on not just like our teachers feeling valued, our classified staff feeling valued, parents and students, everybody in our district, and that mindset that everybody matters. Like, it takes every one of us to
Yeah.
really put together. If I don't have bus drivers, I don't get kids to school every morning.
Yeah.
If I don't have cooks, I can't feed them. If we don't have great custodial staff, then we don't have buildings where we feel like we can put kids. And so, like, I think that idea of everybody matters here, and that's helped us build some of that staffing piece. But I would tell you that I think it's still difficult. And we just advertised for a certified position, and, like, we had more applications than anybody anticipated. And I think part of that is because, we've worked really hard to make ourselves, a place people wanna come. That's our goal. We want you to want to be here. We say all the time we want our kids to love coming to school. We also want our adults to love coming to school because that's how kids will also love coming to school.
Yeah. Yeah, that's such a huge building that culture of belonging. It's built on that foundation of excitement coming to the place, but having that sort of all people matters, like you said, Cub Nation, all people matters, such a huge piece to it. You mentioned earlier building a culture of excellence, so I want to dive a little deeper into that and talk about instructional excellence. Tell me a little bit about what the district is doing in terms of academics. I mean, I think you mentioned earlier too that, or we spoke about kind of this new assessment and what that implication is for rural districts and those things.
So, one of the very first step that we really had to hone in on was really taking and making sure that the curriculum and the resources that we were using were aligned to what we were expecting to teach. So, I think there is a historical piece to this. So we historically we'd had long-term teachers who had taught the same grade level for years and years and years. They knew what they needed to teach to kids inside and outside. And as we saw those teachers retire and we saw new teachers come into place, there's just not that same level of experience. And so we really didn't have a consistent curriculum spread throughout. And so we really looked at how can we make sure that we have resources that are aligned, that are consistent across the board. And so we've adopted reading resources. We adopted CKLA in reading. We adopted Envision in math, and really worked on creating some of that continuity. And
Yeah.
then have really hard to get some professional development, especially at our lower levels, because we wanted to see our scores improve. And the letters training that came out from the state, we really worked on getting some people in. We've done we've had some retirements, and so we didn't roll it out to everybody all at once. We've kind of cycled that through.
Yeah.
Our excitement is we now have an in-house trainer who's going to be able to target some of that training, and so we're really excited about that piece. But I think part of that was the resources. Then once we got the resources in place, we needed good data. Like, people talk about data a lot. Sometimes when I hear data, I go, "Oh, here we go again," right?
Yeah.
But to me, it's about having the right data, not just data. Like, I need what's right, what gives me information. And so at our middle school and high school, we actually added the pre-ACT. So our state pays for it like at one grade, ninth grade, and then they pay for the ACT in 11th grade. And we really wanted to see that across the board. So we actually added that at 8th and 10th. So now we have 3 grade levels of pre-ACT data, and the conversations we're able to have with kids who are saying, "I want to go and do XYZ," because now they're thinking big, right? We talked about the promise. Now they're dreaming big, and we can say, "Hey, look, in order to be successful, we've you've got to grow in this area. If you want to go and be a scientist or an engineer, your science and math scores have got to be good. And
Yeah.
so these are the areas that you need to improve on. And so we looked at that, but then we also took a look at, we talk a lot about at-risk screeners. So an at-risk screener, really you're sifting to get to the bottom, right? You want those kids that are struggling to filter through your sifter. But we've implemented the new term that is being used is called proficiency screener. So now instead of sifting for the ones that are struggling, we're sifting for the ones who are proficient. Totally different viewpoint. Like when you're sifting for at risk, you're typically looking at the 40th percentile. When you're sifting for proficient, you're typically looking at like the 80th. And so which kids actually are proficient in our standards? And our state has tried to do that. Like they've done what they've called interim assessments. But we don't get the test back. Like our teachers can't see the questions. A kid struggled on this question, but I have no idea what that question was. I know what standard it covered, but I don't know what it was. And we didn't get to select the standards. And so we've worked with KCK and Olathe have been doing that for a while. And so I kind of said, hey, look, like I don't have somebody in my district who can come in and do the analytics behind that. Like I just don't. I don't have somebody who can write the tests. Like we're writing a third grade test. I've got 3 third grade teachers. Like, and that's it. And so we started looking at how we could partner with them and how we could partner with a group of people to come in and have the big group of kids that give us the good data, the good analytic data, and give us good comparisons. And then how can we utilize the expertise that maybe other districts are able to have that we just can't? Like our district, we can afford to do that. And so I'm apparently giving some stuff. All right. It's good stuff.
Yeah,
but I think, and so we started these proficiency screeners. And so we got to select the standards that came out. And so in first quarter, we said, these are the things we're going to teach in first quarter. We want to test these things. But the best part has been when those things have come back and we've used the data, but just the opportunity for teachers to sit and look at the types of questions that are much deeper questions than what our text typically does. And then when those analytics come back, we get to use a big bank of people, a big bank of kids to come up with some predictive scores that it would take us 10 or 15 years to gain enough data on. So I really feel like as we talk about rural schools and where rural schools are going to have to go to continue to make improvements, we've got to partner with each other. We have to be able to come together and say, my kids, my third graders taking this test, my 40 some third graders taking this test, it would take years to get that data. And so how can we then come together? And then the next step of that is, how can we take people who are using similar resources and come together and let our teachers have professional development around, your kids scored really well on this standard and my kids didn't. Tell me what are you doing? Are you modifying anything? Show me what you did. That's that learning from each other that I think we have to get a lot better at. Professional development's a huge piece of this. So we've kind of made a shift towards that. It's definitely a new idea and a new term for us, but I think it's done some really good things in terms of conversations and in terms of instructional practices.
Yeah, there's so many great nuggets that you just shared there, because it is so much about it is, any type of data, you can get paralysis by analysis, right? So what you started it with was the right data, and then creating these kind of this partnership with the other schools to get to the exact right data. And to me, what it sounds like is it's really shifted shifted the conversations that are happening so that they can be so much proactive for our kids, which is like that's the root goal when we're talking about instructional excellence and how assessment and data weaves into it, that can really drive a district forward. So I want to shift topics and shift gears just a little bit and really talk about how the district is embedding social emotional learning in the school, because I know you're doing some work there, and you mentioned that the elementary has done some really specific intentional work around that. So can you share with us a little bit about what you all are doing there?
So people talk about it coming back after COVID. I've lived in Little Land a long time, remember? So we saw this shift coming long before COVID, that what we were getting in our elementary schools, the kiddos that were coming were having more and more social emotional needs. COVID exacerbated that, like, and really put a huge spotlight on it, and it made it more kids. And so when we started talking about social emotional, it wasn't a choice. Like, this was necessary for us to be able to educate kids. We had to do something around this area. And I tell you, we have some excellent school counselors who have really led this charge, and have said, hey, look, it's really important that we embed social emotional learning. And so we had that piece of it. Where we were really struggling were those kids who we would call them tier 3 behavior kids. But,
Yeah.
we talk about kids who are disrupting the learning environments for lots of kids. And we really didn't have a good system. And so our elementary school counselor did a ton of work around trauma-informed, learning and trauma-informed environments, and spent time working with our teachers around that, and how that looks in the classroom. And then she spent a lot of time thinking about how could we, modify our environment to really, help those kids. And so
Yeah.
they implemented the Cub Cave, and so our Cub Cave exists at our elementary school. And when it first started, it had lots of kids. I mean, lots of kids coming in, and it was, the idea was they needed a break. Like,
Yeah.
they needed a little break. And sometimes that was also a needed break for that classroom. We needed to make sure that the behaviors that were in there were consistent with the learning that was happening. And um, but you can't just remove that kid from the learning environment, because then they don't learn either. And so this was an opportunity for them to come and take a break. And so we have a lot of very targeted things in there that are meant to, and I certainly can't talk as intelligently as she can about it, but each item that she has in there has a very specific purpose,
Yeah.
to help a child regulate. And every child needs a little something different. We have some kids who will sit on the spinning stool, and good heavens, I would be sick before we
Yeah.
ever started. They can just spin and spin and spin, and
Yeah.
that's what their body needs. And so, she really worked to intentionally put those kinds of pieces in. So combined with a tier 1 social emotional curriculum that is targeted along the way,
Yep.
um, and teachers who have the professional development to be able to respond to those kids. And then you have a Cub Cave where if a kid needs a break, and sometimes that is, I need a break right now. And
Yeah.
sometimes that's, hey, look, we know this kid has a really hard time transitioning from this activity to this activity. So we're going to put a break right there in the middle. And
Mhm.
like, they really target that to individual students. And the change in the building has been remarkable. It's not only changed the building and the classroom feel and how disruptive things were, it's also changed our ability for our administrator to be an instructional leader and to
Mm.
actually be able to work with teachers. And she absolutely still works with kids who are struggling in that moment with behaviors, but she's not spending all day
Yeah.
kids with stress, and not she says, I'm running from one fire to another." Like, that's
Yeah.
where we started. And for her to have the time to be able to do that, we're starting to see that trickle up into our middle school and high school. And each one of them are also doing some very targeted things. Our middle school has really, they run Operation Orange. So Operation Orange is, kids who are going out of their way to do things that are kind for others. They really talk a lot about kindness, and I think that has really also helped our middle school kids, reset. You know, sometimes it's, and good heavens, adults are that way too. I mean, like, you put an adult on social media and they say things they would never say in person. And
Right.
just a reminder for them that we expect kindness. And so we're seeing some of that work trickle up. And I just, like, I look at it now, and it's a different space. And it was a different space because it had to be a different space. We could not continue and have learning happen in that space. So people talk a lot about social emotional and where it belongs. I smile and laugh because I spent a lot of time in an elementary school. You can't teach elementary school without teaching some social and emotional learning. We've been teaching kids to get along with each other since school started,
Yeah.
right? And that's what we're doing. We're teaching kids to get along with each other, and we're teaching kids to get along in an environment where there are other people who aren't just like them. So I feel like they have taken real steps there, and I have gotten to watch just the change in environment in teachers in classrooms, and then with our administrators as well.
Oh, that's awesome. There's so many great things that you shared in this, but some of the things that keep, as we kind of wrap up, that stand out is about this, like, where we started, this notion of rural districts and community. And so that keeps standing out as a key thing, and that leads to kind of partnership and how that weaves into the culture of academic excellence. And, my favorite thing that I keep going back to is Cub Nation, all people matters. You mentioned that. And I think that is, it's exemplifying exactly what's occurring in the community with these partnerships, and then what you're doing from an academic and SEL perspective and all these different things. So, Amber, I can't thank you enough for just sitting down, sharing your time with us today, and telling us a little bit more about your journey and the district. As we kind of close out, I always like to close and ask, there's a number of superintendents, this is their first year, or there's a number of those folks out there that are looking at that seat and they're aspiring superintendents. And you've sat in the seat for a number of years. What advice or guidance would you give to those people that are in their first year or aspiring superintendents?
So I think really two kind of big pieces, and one of those is about the importance of building the people underneath you. I listened to a football coach, because great learning comes from coaches, and this one had a piece that I will never forget. And he talked about why he met with his individual coaches off the field, and he said, "I meet with them separately because I want to coach them there. I don't want to have to coach them on the field because then their people lose." Trust in their abilities, and that really stood out to me. And so I really believe in the value of building, for me, who my position coaches are a lot of my principals and my directors and that type of thing. And so finding those people who are underneath you and building them, you will build your own leadership by growing the leaders of others
Yeah.
and leadership of others. And I really feel like that's very important. And it's hard to do as a new superintendent, I think, because everything's so new. But that time that you spend with them, and everything feels important, but the time that you spend with the leaders underneath you will never be wasted time. Um, and so I really feel like growing leadership in that realm right underneath where you're at is really important. And so I would say spend time there. And then my second piece is, I heard a lot about the loneliness, the silos of being a superintendent. And I can't speak to other states because Kansas is the only place I've ever worked. But I was just speaking to someone this week who said, "I don't feel that here." And I said, "It is. It's different. It's different than my relationships were with other principals, because I had some of those in my own district.
Yeah.
But I have a connection with other superintendents that I've never felt in any other position." I have people that we have group chats that blow up about every day about things. And it's not just school things, it's this person's kid and this person's family, and they are truly a team. And we talk a lot about, individual districts and coming together, and I will tell you that the group of people, that you meet as a superintendent and the networking that you do there is so important.
Yeah.
And it is not it can be lonely at times, but it's not lonely if you have networked and you have partners. And I have great superintendents that I could call right now and they would stop what they were doing to help me. And
Yeah.
those are the kinds of relationships that I think will matter, especially as we talk about scenarios where we have lots of new superintendents coming into the mix. It's going to take other superintendents coming along behind them and saying, "It's going to be okay. Yep. Yeah,
Yep.
I dealt with that too. It'll be all right."
Yeah.
And being supportive and building those really tight friendships, because those are your colleagues. Like, those are the people who now sit with you. And so I think that would probably be my second piece.
Absolutely. Great advice for those folks that are looking at it. So again, thank you so much for sharing your time with us and sharing your story in the district. And hopefully we'll look forward to kind of having you back on and continuing the conversation sometime.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you.